USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, October 11th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger along with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Why don't we start right out with what was a great heavyweight battle in Mankato as Minnesota State split the weekend with St. Cloud.
Yeah, I thought it was an unbelievable series to who would imagine another shutout by Dryden McKay to open up that series, but then to have St. Cloud come back, and it was almost like I watched some of the game and then the highlights. It almost like once they scored one on McKay, St. Cloud seemed to get better, and to be having one versus two right off the bat, and to have the schedule that Mankato has. They get the number one team one week, the number two team the next, and now to go where they're going in the icebreaker is going to be an interesting first 3 weeks of the season. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Jimmy, your thoughts on that weekend?
You know what? I think we go back to last April and we get to Pittsburgh and everybody's expecting a 1-0 or a 2-1 or a 3-1 game, and we get a 5-4 game, with a crazy ending. And that was what no one expected. And you didn't know what you were going to get this weekend, but I think that shows that when you got on that really big stage of a Frozen Four, that neither team could really play to their identity. You get back into a college barn in a early October game. Both teams played to their defensive identity. I thought that, goaltending was great throughout the weekend, but I thought that just general defense and the ability to get back on plays and be defensively responsible, which we didn't see much of last April, that returned. And that was the big change between those two teams. But a great series, to open up the season. I mean, that's what you're looking for. And it's so hard when you're scheduling these games 2-3 years out to know where teams are going to be on the roadmap. But, as you mentioned, Derek, Mankato gets a number one team one week. They become the number one team. They get the number two team the next week. Who knows where everybody's going to be in the poll when it comes out today? It could be 1-2 again. Maybe they switch. We won't see. But now they're going to play either Providence, Michigan, or Duluth, in the next two games. I mean, that's a crazy start to the season. That's almost unheard of to play that many great opponents right up front.
You might have 4 or 5 of the top five in the nation, wouldn't you think? I mean, those guys could be with Michigan undefeated, Providence, and Duluth. I mean, and then throw in Mankato, that could be maybe even the top 4. It's
not what we usually come to expect, but whoever did scheduling, particularly the two icebreakers, I think that they did a good job of getting good teams in.
Well, it's a great place for Mankato to start out 3-1 against teams that are going to be near the top of the field. That's going to help them in the pairwise in the postseason. You also mentioned the shutout for Dryden McKay. That gives him 26 on his career. That ties him with Ryan Miller for the career record. And he has as many as 32 regular season games left because they get the 2 extra from the icebreaker plus playoffs. Who knows what that number might be? He could get into the mid-30s this season the way he's played in his career.
Absolutely. That's crazy. A special shout out to Darren Blue. Darren was really kind of the architect of putting the recruiting along with Mike Hastings of putting this team together. He retired over the summer. 21 years as a coach at Mankato, 25 at Mankato total as a player, and took a job in the private sector. But gosh, he also did their scheduling. He's called me numerous times about scheduling. So he gave them a present on the way out the door that you're going to get the number one team, defending national champions, the number two team, and then the icebreaker. So shout out to Darren for his career, but he's got a job as a schedule maker somewhere.
But as we say, schedule the tough games, win them, and you're going to get a really high pairwise. So that pays off.
I can't believe we're on week 2 after being on the committee last year and not talking about pairwise. We're talking about pairwise already. I mean, we had to pick those teams straight up, 16 teams. going off of wins and losses, common opponents, everything but a computer. Now I saw that on Twitter the other day. Somebody said, well, how come they've dropped in the pairwise? Because there was a weaker opponent. I mean, we're in week 2, and I'm forbidding pairwise talk on this podcast, at least until November.
You know, it's funny. My Facebook memories came up today. I made a comment on a story the NCAA posted on this date in 2017. It was their first bracketology of the season. And their headline was, "It's not too early to be starting to talk about bracketology." And my comment was, yes, it is. I mean, let's get some games. Let's at least get everybody playing. You know, the Ivy's still got a few weeks yet.
I left out St. Cloud. So St. Cloud will be in the top 4. But, I mean, you could have Michigan at 3. You could have Duluth probably in the 4 or 5 range, as well as Providence. I mean, at very worst, you're going to have 4 of the top 8 teams probably in the nation. I don't vote anymore, so you guys tell me.
I'm impressed by this field, and you know, again, you recruit this field. You know, I think it was last year that they announced it, but it's been on people's schedules for a couple of years, and what an unbelievable job putting this tournament together. I mean, this is the Murderers Row tournament. This could be your Frozen Four. I mean, I know that we're really far out and we shouldn't be, you know, looking that far ahead, but these are 4 teams that are going to be in the mix all year long. And, you know, we saw at times how good Providence has been in a little they've played. Michigan, they're still running up scores and throwing up big numbers. And that power play that we talked about last week isn't, you know, falling asleep at all. And then you have obviously getting Minnesota State and Minnesota Duluth in there. I mean, if you have a ticket to that game on Friday, those games, don't miss it. Like this, you know, get there early, watch both games, both nights, even if it's a consolation game on Saturday. That will be 2 of the best teams you're going to see play all season.
The other icebreaker happened this past weekend. Boston College and Quinnipiac tied 2 apiece on Friday, and BC won the shootout. And then Quinnipiac down Northeastern blanked the Huskies on Saturday, and BC beat Holy Cross to move on in the icebreaker tournament. A pretty good tournament, but good news for BC out of the whole weekend.
You know, and it just shows how, you know, fragile things can be when you end up with a predetermined field tournament. There was no BC and Northeastern were not going to play. We weren't going to have a beanpot final at an icebreaker, and that was probably the smart thing to do. But because of that, you know, every game meant something in terms of standings within the tournament, and shootouts, you know, got you that extra point. BC, they were down 1-0 on the last shot, and they threw out a defenseman to hopefully score the goal, and Eamon Powell, and he ends up going 5-hole, scores the goal, a shot down the other end. Eric Dopp stops it, and then the winning goal by Carew for BC, that gave them that extra point. And that extra point was what put them over the top. You know, Northeastern woke up on Saturday morning controlling their destiny. They had beat Holy Cross on Friday in regulation. So another regulation win over Quinnipiac. They've got 6 points. Nobody can catch them. They win the icebreaker. But I called both days on Ness, and Northeastern did not look itself on Saturday. I don't know really what was different. I thought they were a pretty good team on Friday against Holy Cross. Maybe it was the opponent that frustrated them, but Quinnipiac was a different team as well, going to the net hard, doing a really good job of the little things. They kind of helped BC out in putting it to a situation that BC, if they had won in regulation, overtime, shootout, they would have won the icebreaker, and they came out guns a-blazing. It was 4-0 before the ice was dry. They chased Holy Cross's starting goalie Eric Gordon, in the first 4 minutes, and that was all you had to do. I mean, that BC played with confidence. I thought that they got better as the weekend went on. I thought Quinnipiac got better as the weekend went on. But a good tournament. Again, 2 icebreaker tournaments this year. It's a little bit different, but you get one we just talked about coming up this weekend with 4 teams that could be in the top 8 of the nation. This one, 3 nationally ranked teams out of 4. I mean, it's pretty impressive, the teams they got into these fields. And it was good hockey, undoubtedly, out in Worcester this past weekend.
And I'll leave that to you, Jimmy. I thought you did a great job of calling it, but to be in the building, you've got me watching on my phone at times, hearing you was a little bit fun for me in a different situation of on the weekend. But I think you did a great job on the call and there with the analysis. But interesting to see Billy Riga's first games there behind the bench at Holy Cross, and seeing what they were doing different and how they were playing different. Same uniforms, a lot of purple. But now with the Purple Eagles and St. Thomas and Holy Cross, we've got and then throw Mankato in there. We've got a lot of purple going in college hockey right now. But I thought you did the interesting thing that we haven't heard much about that whole thing is the tournament was decided on a shootout. Are we gonna go in that direction? Because that's where, there was no winner, there was no loser. It was just everybody goes back on their skills competition. And really that was determined off of, a shootout.
Yeah, you didn't know at the time that the shootout on Friday in the first game of the tournament was going to have the impact that it did at the end of it, but that's certainly true. And as long as this stays in the regular season, I'm fine. You hear people that say, "Oh, NCAA tournaments, even the NHL. Oh, if you're in double overtime, it takes too long. Just go to a shootout." I'm a purist. I don't agree with that. The one thing I want to say before we move on is Bill Riga at Holy Cross. That team's picked to finish 10th in the Atlantic Hockey this year. I don't know if that's a 10th place team. They've got to get some confidence going. But I'll tell you, when they came out scared against BC, I thought very scared and dug a hole that they couldn't come out of. But when they were playing their game in the second period, they looked like a dangerous team. And the Eagles, actually, their goaltender had to be very sharp. And, that's one of the things that I think that Atlantic Hockey could be in for a bit of a surprise with how good this Holy Cross team could become. Bill Riga is doing a nice job of getting his staple on these players. And that's one of the most difficult things as a head coach, going to a new program. You didn't recruit really anybody. He has 2 transfers. That's all he brought in himself. I think he's doing a pretty nice job of getting them to buy in on what he wants, the style of hockey he wants them to play.
And something David Brard always did a good job of recruiting there. His teams are always hard to play against. And so there's pieces there. There's pieces there for sure. So just to follow up, we went Providence, Mankato game 1 this week, Duluth, Michigan game 2. Winners play second night. So you will have Providence versus probably the number 1 team in the nation again, I would think, followed by Michigan, which could be a 3, maybe a 2. I don't know. We'll see.
If you had told me that was the Frozen 4 for this season, I would believe you. Well, talking about chasing goalies like we did a few minutes ago, that's what happened with Wisconsin over the weekend as Michigan Tech swept them 5-2 and 5-1.
I'm impressed with Joe Sean's club. That they're going to be a good team, but I'm concerned about Wisconsin. I think they had some high expectations. Obviously, polls are polls, whatever. I like them. Some people hate them, but they got a high ranking early on, a top 20 ranking after losing a lot of their team from last year. Obviously, Cole Caulfield is the biggest piece, but they didn't look like anything like the Wisconsin team from last year. I mean, so different that you don't really recognize it. Schools, what did you see? I mean, they seem a little different.
Well, I think that it lost to this whole shuffle of playing Wisconsin and Michigan Tech picked 3rd, got 2 first-place votes in the CCHA. I mean, I think they were making a little statement there that, hey, don't be giving the title to Mankato yet. Don't be putting us behind Bemidji. And, maybe this is one of those teams. They did return a lot. They did have to go out and they did lose 1 or 2 guys on grad transfers, but they did bring 1 or 2 guys in. Joe has done an outstanding job there. They're always hard to play against. He's won a lot of hockey games at the North American League level in college hockey for a reason. And Chris Brooks, who won national championship at Stevens Point as an assistant or as associate head coach there. So they've got a very experienced staff that's going to have that team ready to play. And you talked about Wisconsin kind of going through a little bit of transition without Cole Caulfield. I think you saw it. And I think that was Michigan Tech flexing their muscles a little bit, saying, don't forget about us in the CCHA.
Well, we still have to come some talk about Atlantic Hockey's success on Friday night still the issue of stats and what are coaches looking for in early season games. That's coming up in a moment here on USCHO Weekend Review.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
You're listening to USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Atlantic Hockey had a good night on Friday against Big Ten teams, taking 3 of 4 games, but got swept on the Saturday slate of games. In fact, there were no winners in the league at all because RIT and Army in league competition played to a tie, so nobody won a game over the weekend on Saturday. That puts the league 3-15-0 out of conference, which I know has to be disappointing to the league commissioner, Bob DiGregorio, and to the members of the league. There's still a fair number of out-of-conference games to go, but that's a pretty big hole that has been dug by the league so far.
Yeah, really. I was really excited to see the 3 Big Ten wins on, to see Canisius beat Penn State, to see Air Force. I was really happy for Air Force to open up after opening up with CC, to go out to Michigan State and win, and then to see Bentley. First of all, to get Ohio State in their building and then win that game is big for the league. And I was really excited to see the follow up. Obviously you had Mercyhurst out of Minnesota and Niagara at North Dakota. Those are tall tasks for any team, no matter going into those buildings, no matter what your name is and what league you're from. But I was really excited to see the follow up, and you saw those teams bounce back. I saw the Big Ten bounce back, and obviously Ohio State in a big way. But that's something that the Atlantic Hockey's really put an emphasis on. And they went from 28 games when we dropped our program to 26, and which included more non-conference games. And with that is more opportunities to win, but also the flip side is more opportunities to lose. You saw last year with the pairwise, the mock pairwise last year, that it was always out there when there was so few non-conference games. Atlantic Hockey had a couple teams what would have been in the top 10. And so those are interesting things and interesting trends. But I really believe that there's too many good coaches in Atlantic Hockey for this to go sideways like this. I think you'll see them improve. You'll see the record get up to even better. They've got more scholarships. The rinks are getting better. I believe that, like you said, disappointing to the commissioner and disappointing to the coaches, that they'll rebound and have an even better year non-conference than they did 2 years ago, because they do have more opportunities. You've got to do a good job of scheduling. You've got to make sure that you're giving yourself the opportunity to win home games, and you got to be selective. But that was a murderer's row weekend for Atlantic Hockey last weekend with all those matchups, and I thought they did that's a very respectable weekend. So hats off to those teams that won, and I think that they'll continue to get better. I like the direction that the Atlantic Hockey teams are trending this year.
To your point, Derek, that could have been an 0 for 10 weekend out of conference, and instead it's 3-7. At this point, 3 is the number of wins, though. So I guess you still have to look. You still graded on the whole picture. So are they in a tough spot? Yes. Will they win some games? Hopefully. I mean, you've got to hope for a little bit of a bounce back. And there's plenty of games to go. I don't worry too much about Atlantic Hockey, but I do, you don't want to start 3-15 because, you even to get up to the 300, 400 winning percentage, you still have to be, well above 500 to dig. So I'm sure that everybody, and I saw Commissioner Bob DiGregorio out in Worcester this weekend and talked to some folks out there, and very, very happy with the fact that you can beat 3 Big Ten teams, because it had been 4 years since there had been a win against a Big Ten team for Atlantic Hockey. That's a big that's a big positive. But you got to hope that they can win some games here to even things off.
And I think there is still an opportunity there too. RIT, for example, still has 7 non-conference games to go on the schedule. So there's still quite a bit out there.
Plenty of games to play.
You would have had 2 wins of us. We would have had Miami. We had Miami. I can tell you that because it was announced by Miami. So we would have been home on Friday night. Well, nothing against Miami. I'm just being an optimistic coach. I think that they're going to be better. I think you said there's still a lot of opportunities out there, and you still got Air Force a couple times. You got them playing CC again, where they just beat them previous weekend in an exhibition game. So there are some games out there to move forward. I think Sacred Heart is they'll get up for the Connecticut Classic that they won a couple years ago. I mean, there's too many to talk about. AIC still got a whole bunch to go. It's a long way. Don't throw the dirt on Atlantic hockey's grave yet, Jimmy.
Well, one thing Jim mentioned that will kind of lead into another topic is coaches' challenges and replays. Bentley won on Friday night. It looked like Ohio State had scored to tie the game. There was a challenge, and on review, Ohio State had come in offside, and so the goal was taken away, and Bentley hung on to win 2-1. Is it a good thing to challenge offside on goals like that? Are there too many challenges and too many replays? Where do we stand in the whole replay atmosphere and landscape right now?
Well, there was nothing to lose. I mean, I read the Monday morning quarterback this morning, and you got 3 minutes left in the game. You lose your timeout if you challenge. So it's not like anything's a massive. It's not a penalty. That was an easy challenge for Bentley, especially. I was telling Jimmy before we went on the call here, before you got on, if you're 50-50, 60-40 in that scenario, and it's just going to cost you your timeout, why not? Why not give it a run? And as a coach, I like the fact to right or wrong. But what really gets you as a coach is when, and you talked about this also, it happened at the Army game, when somebody goes in and looks at something and they don't challenge. I complained that I saw contact to the head, and the referee said, yeah, I might have. And then they go in and look at it, but you never actually had to use their challenge. As an opposition's coach, your first question is, did he just use his challenge when he's wrong? Like, no, I wanted to look at that on my own. That's where it gets a little bit long. I can understand on goals. I can understand if they have a question on their goal and it's their decision to go look at it. Absolutely. But when you're challenging penalties and all that stuff, just because maybe, then it gets a little bit long. And I know that that's a pet peeve of the coach. And we didn't even know if we had still went back to a penalty yet, because they've talked about putting a penalty in numerous times. But there's no reason why you can't challenge and go after that if it's just a timeout. It doesn't hurt you too much.
My thing with replay and challenges and whatever you call, kind of faux challenges where you just kind of convince the referee to look at it, but you don't use your challenge. There's that inconsistency which bothers me, but sometimes the length gets there too. And I get it. I've talked to Frank Cole, who's the head of officials for the NCAA, and Steve Piotrowski, great guy who's, done a lot. He was the rules editor for the NCAA for a long time and still involved at the Frozen Fours and all that stuff. And they talk about, and Steve, by the way, still the head of the Big Ten officials. They always talk about, we just want to get the call right, no matter how long it takes. Well, with the offsides, I think that there should be a clock. This is the one review that I think there should be a clock on. And if you can't figure it out in 2 minutes, then it's too close and there's no need to, see if there was a microscopic offside. I think the spirit of the offside rule and offside challenge should be to eliminate obvious calls that were blown, not to get out a magnifying glass or a microscope and figure out if a guy's skate was over the line by a fraction of 3 centimeters. That's where I think that the issue comes in. If you can't figure that one out pretty quickly, then the call should stand. And I haven't seen video of the Bentley call. USCHO's Dan Rubin, who does their play-by-play for Bentley Radio, was telling me all about it on Friday, but I still haven't seen video to see how offside it was. I know that it was, I think he said that Ryan Soderquist, the head coach of Bentley, missed it, but then his captain was sitting on the blue line and thought it was offside, set to challenge. And Derek, as you said, there was nothing to lose. There was 3 minutes left in the game. If the challenge was wrong, you've used your timeout with 3 minutes left. And if you go to overtime, you get your timeout back anyway. So there was nothing you had to lose. So there was no risk by challenging right there. But at the same time, just make sure that it's not taking 15 minutes. I don't even know how long it took at Bentley, but we've seen them. I go back to BU North Dakota, about 3-4 years ago in the NCAA regional, where it took it seemed to add a day to the tournament because it took so long to get the call right. Let's just be realistic of how long it takes to go through these challenges.
I think you're right on that, but I also think there's a lack of technology in certain buildings. Yes. And we're talking about Bentley, which is a new building, probably got more technology, but you have some old buildings that it takes a while to dial up. You don't know how long they're rewinding it. You don't know if they're finding the right angle. So we're not working with NHL technology. So I think that there is a mid ground there to say, you know what, it's too close to tell. But a pet peeve of that is if it's too close to tell, don't sit there for 5 minutes. But I don't think you can put a time limit on because of the different types of buildings. So I kind of agree with you, but I kind of don't. But then to jump on, I don't want to take Ed's spotlight, but you got to know what's going on too in the building, right, Ed?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you see replays happen. You see, well, like I was talking to you guys about before we went on. We saw referees go over to a coach, talk for a little bit, go into the replay booth, spend 2 or 3 minutes in there, come out, talk to both coaches, play goes on. Nobody watching the game, nobody covering the game has any idea what just happened. The referees only in a couple leagues are mic'd up. It really should be across the board, at least at Division I, to put a wireless mic on one of the referees so they can explain, or have which they're supposed to do, have the PA announcer tell what's going on, but they haven't done either.
But you just get the goal is under review.
Yeah, the play is under review.
Even as a coach, sometimes as a coach, you're going, what are we reviewing here? Because they don't even, you don't even know. They just what are you looking at? So if they could say the goal is under review, coaches challenge offsides, or coaches challenge contact to the head penalty. I think that would go a long way with the fans, and they wouldn't be so impatient like you're talking about being, Jimmy. I mean, I think that's where it comes down to is a little, just like in coaching, just like in anything, a little communication goes a long way.
I think it was Penn State, Notre Dame a couple of years ago. There was a challenge going on. Guy Godowski made the challenge, head coach at Penn State. And the broadcasters thought they were looking at offside, and it turned out it was too many men that they were looking at, and finally made that call. So it would help the quality of that. They spent 3 minutes on the TV broadcast looking at different angles and saying, "Oh, he was in clean." And as it turns out, they've modified or kind of helped on that rule. But it was a guy getting off a little early, and way on the other end of the ice, there was an extra guy on the ice, but that overturned the goal. Well, talking about technology, we're week 2 without college hockey stats in men's Division I. I don't think things were any better this weekend. Something has got to be done. The commissioners need to get together with the NCAA and make something happen.
And it's, talking to some commissioners this weekend, it does seem like those, conversations are happening. They've gone to the NCAA, from what I understand. They've gone to Genius, which is the staff provider. But it does, I think that at the commissioner level, at the league level now, they've realized how much everybody misses college hockey stats. And I think there's a desire to try to almost, rebirth college hockey stats, so that you have at least one central repository where everybody can get accurate data. And, Brad Schlossman out at the Grand Forks Herald had a fantastic story on, I think it was Friday, kind of as explaining the whole situation that we're in with stats, but, it was a good, really nice piece on Tim Danahy, who ran college hockey stats. And I don't think I even realized that he, behind the scenes worked almost tirelessly just to correct mistakes, and there's still human error in inputting stats, and user error in the system. Power plays used to have to be adjusted, and there could be assists given to wrong teams, like we were accidentally entering guys from the wrong team. And Tim would sit there on a Friday or Saturday night and go through every box score and try to fix everything, and did obviously a great job, because over the course of nearly 2 decades, he got it all to work. But that's what college hockey still needs, is somebody to go through and just find all the user errors, and then also put together the infrastructure that will get correct data out to everybody. And I felt like this weekend it was a little bit better. Live boxes were still, a struggle for everybody that's trying to, put it together on their own right now, including our own Tim Bruley from USCHO. But we're not there, and it's a struggle. It's a real struggle.
You mentioned live boxes. We were watching some of the boxes on school websites through Sidearm Sports, for example. And there's a place where you can see side-by-side stats, which when you're broadcasting or writing, you want to be able to see. And we'd see things fluctuate from 4 shots on goal in a period to 14. And at one point, a team was listed as having 54 shots on goal in that period. And there's just not good information there. I don't know what's going on, whether it's user error with the new software for the people keeping stats at games or other kinds of bugs. But it was really a mess, even at a game, to try to keep up on information.
You talk about free agency in sports. Holy cow! Who is the most desired free agent in college hockey right now next to me? I'm employed, but who is the most desired free agent right now? Tim Dennehy.
Yep.
Yeah.
He could make a killing. I don't know why he stopped, but he could start his own company right back up. I'll tell you, you've got a need. I followed obviously stats all weekend, watching games. But I also have been trying to find what some of my former players have done. One of them listed him as a healthy scratch, and he played, and vice versa. There was one that wasn't listed as playing who played. So you're trying to find things out. And you're trying to. I mean, I think we were really, really spoiled with the work that Tim has done, and hopefully. We could get my program back in, Tim back in college hockey, and that would handle get rid of both of the big need pressing issues that we have right now.
Let's finally kind of get a coach's viewpoint on early season games. The losses, wins at the beginning of the season count just as much as the ones at the end of the season. What's it like to prepare in October? How do you get ready early in the season for this kind of competition?
I think the question is where are you? What team are you? Where are you at? And a loss. You hear a loss in October is the same as a loss in March. I will tell you, I tried to always get as many players involved in non-conference games as possible within reason. You'd want to make at least 1 forward change or 2 forward changes a night if possible. You also probably wanted to change one of your defensemen out. You also have that extra skater now to play with, which really helps. But I will also say the difference between in 2013-14 when we were battling for the pairwise spot, there's that dreaded P word again, pairwise. I coached a lot different than in maybe say 2018, where I knew that we were preparing to be good at the end of the year. And when we're preparing to be good at the end of the year, you'd want to make sure that you get as many people in the games as possible. You'd probably want to use both goalies on the weekend of non-conference games. If you are, like I said, in 14, when we were 24-8 and we were on the cusp of the 16, 17, 18 slot, you'd play your lineup in the non-conference games because those wins are massive. And those wins for you and your pairwise bump are massive. So I think you've got to really understand where your team is at and what you're preparing for. So if you go out and you lose your first 3 non-conference games, and you're what you think is a lock NCAA team, you got to go out and you got to win those games. Enough tinkering you got to play that right lineup. So I think a lot of it depends on where you see your team, but you're always trying to get as many players in. And some of those are the hardest conversations to have is, you know what, you did nothing wrong on Friday night other than the fact that I need to play this other player and see where he fits in. And you're going to go back in next game. You haven't lost your spot, but just tonight, we're going to make a change to get somebody else a game. And those are tough for kids to understand, that you're looking at the long-term aspect of your team, as well as it's tough if I didn't make any changes. Kids are like, well, why can't we make a change in non-conference? So a lot of communication, as we talked about earlier, goes into it, and making sure you're doing have a realistic idea where your team is.
Yeah, interesting, a point to kind of highlight, calling those games out at the Icebreaker this weekend. Holy Cross had a starting goaltender on Friday, had a fantastic game. And Bill Rieger had said, I might try to get a look at 2 goaltenders. He puts in, another senior on Saturday, doesn't have a good start. But ironically, instead of going back to his senior, when 5 minutes into the game when he decided to relieve him, he went to a freshman. And in the course of 2 games, he got to see all 3 of his goaltenders in high speed game action. And I think that as a coach, you're right. You want to get the benefit of seeing guys in game action. You want to get guys on film. So the more players you get active in these opening weekends, knowing that if you lose some of these games, if you have high expectations and you lose some of these games, it can be detrimental. But at the same time, if you need to see guys in game action, needs to see film, so you can let these kids see stuff when they're not playing on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday the next week. And you can't do that if you're just trying to put in your same lineup every week. So I think I like the approach that you just kind of outlined. I do feel like a lot of coaches do take that into consideration.
And you're gonna have injuries. You're gonna have injuries where you got to have some people with some experience. And I think what your second, third, or your top 6 will probably always be in your lineup. But there's going to be somebody that you envision taking a big jump into your top 9 that may not get the job done. And there's that freshman that you say is a top 9 player that eventually you're going to need to kind of roll into that. And I'll go back to Cody Wido was our all-time leading goal scorer at Robert Morris. And he didn't play his first 5 games of his freshman career. And because there wasn't a spot for him in the top, we had an old team. There wasn't a spot for him in the top 6 until somebody failed. And he failed, and he never was scratched again. And the rest is history. And I look like an idiot for not playing him in those first 5 games. But it's all part of the process. And if you communicate that and you realize that it's a long-term progression, the season is a long-term progression, that you're going to lose some people. Some people are going to perform better than you expected. Some people are going to perform worse than you expected. And you've got to be ready to be able to fill those holes if you need it. And Ed, I mean, just look at RIT last year. Look at their goaltending. If you would have said who the goalie at the end of the year was compared to the start of the year, would that have played out that way?
Even knowing who is going to be able to be in the lineup with people having to sit out. You can't predict. I know it's tough for teams where they've brought players back for a 5th year. Maybe you have a few extra players on the roster. That's got to make it even more difficult for coaches, especially trying to get freshmen in the lineup. And maybe some of the guys you brought back are players who might be a top 6 or a regular defenseman.
Great point. We got backups of 5th year guys, transfers that you're trying to get a look at. I mean, freshmen that you brought in. I mean, it's a challenge right now, and you're seeing some teams carry some massive rosters because they were backed up of kids having to bring in and transfers. And I mean, people, that's one of my case studies for this year, is to see how grad transfers and transfers from the portal translate, and who does the best. Because if we when I do have to start putting together a team again, that those are going to be key influences on what you do. So I think that you've got a whole different scenario, and you want to try to get as many people in as you can. And there's some teams with 6 lines. I mean, So you're going to have to make some changes sooner or later, because you don't want that 18th forward to lose hope.
Well, thanks for the insight on that. We hope to give some more coaches insights, which is why we're so excited to have Derek on the podcast this season to kind of give a more inside angle on things. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.